Okay, well, good afternoon. We had a really great first session, and we thank all the speakers again for their great presentation for the first session. The second session is on a very important topic. It's the topic of economic growth and development in Turkey. I can't help but think back the first time I was in Turkey in the 1990s, and as a business person, and I walked into an environment where there was nearly a 200% inflation rate. And our sales forecast, when I walked in, the big sales forecast on the wall of what we were expected to do for that particular year, and it was in the trillions of Turkish lira, which was a pretty good sales forecast, but wasn't that good. I mean, it wasn't quite what trillions would perhaps recommend or suggest to most of you. A lot's happened since then, obviously, not the least of which is just recently there's talk among virtually all of the economics areas and media about BRIC countries being pushed off to the side and a new set of missed countries entering the picture. Obviously BRIC was Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And missed now looks like it's going to be taking its place as the new primary countries of Mexico, Indonesia, South Korea, and T for Turkey. So we're talking about one of the new up-and-coming countries that is going to be on the horizon in the very near future. And the first speaker we have that was going to introduce this area to us is Dr. Rizal Jasur. Dr. Jasur is an assistant professor of finance and healthcare management at the University of Connecticut. He obtained his PhD from the University of Georgia in 2009. He also obtained an MA in economics from the same university and an MBA in finance from Baruch College at the City University of New York in 2003, and a Bachelor of Arts in Public Finance from Istanbul University in 1999. We're very much looking forward to hearing his presentation. Dr. Rizal.
Hello. Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for inviting me, even though I am the Yukon. And also, I want to warn you guys about one thing. There are other Turkish people in the room, and this presentation is probably my subjective view, so probably there are going to be quite a few disagreements, so I'll give you a heads up. But the next thing I'll say is a very objective statement. I think any Turkish person who had training in economics would like to give this presentation, so I'm glad to be here. And these are two pictures from Istanbul, and one of the beauties of the city is that in the same day you can see these views, even right now. So if you ever consider going there, I suggest you should. And my presentation is about Turkish economy, and in fact in the last 10 years Turkey had a very high growth rate, and then previous to that we had high inflation. So I'll try to summarize why we had high inflation and why it fell later on, and also I'll try to explain why we had high growth, and also I can't resist being here, so I'll make my comments on what we should do in the future and what we should not do in the future. So I'll start with a view of per capita income in Turkey. So starting from 1960s, there's a trend upwards, and right now we make about 1/4 of personal income in the U.S. per person. So even though Turkish economy is doing quite well in comparison to the United States, we are still a developing country. But as you see in the late portion, there's a spike, and I assume the session today is a little about that one. And the next slide shows Turkish income in comparison to U.S. income on per capita basis. So it seems like it is slowly increasing. Right now we are close to 1/4 of the U.S. income. And I'll start with inflation. I assume there are quite a few finance and econ students here, so I won't spend too much time on what inflation is. Simply, when prices go up, we have inflation. And why why we have inflation? Well, when money supply goes up, there is inflation. If all the prices go up at the same rate, no problem, but it's a very uneven process. Some prices go up, some don't. Particularly, wages do not increase in the time of inflation, and it leads to problems. So that's why inflation is bad. It leads to lower investment. People don't want to take risk. Also, if you have money, you owe someone, you don't want to pay it because overnight you can make a lot of money from investment or simply putting on loans on a bank. And when you look at here, we had high inflation starting 70s. It peaked up late 90s, and then in 2000, it's been stabilized. So this is the picture from 1980 onward. And now when we go to the special example of Turkey, well, why we had inflation. In fact, if I go back a few slides, money supply goes up, and then we have inflation. But why money supply goes up? For about 99% of the time, there are government deficits behind it, because government needs money, government has deficits. So we had large budget deficits. And why did we have large budget deficits? Well, we did cherish inefficiencies, unproductive activities in Turkey for a long time. As a result, we had budget deficits. And what are these? Well, we had huge agricultural subsidies. So prior to 2000, about 10% of the economy went to agricultural subsidies. And in fact, it happened in a very inefficient way. That is, we needed income sources from productive users to be transferred to these sectors to sustain these subsidies. And in fact, it had two bad effects. One, you need productive income to cover this. Two, you keep people employed in these sectors in which productivity is low, so you're giving up the use of resources on the resources that can be employed in the productive sector. Another thing is public enterprise. Like government firms lost a lot of money every year. And the last one, we had a very nice retirement system. In Turkey, you could retire early 40s, and this is not a joke, it's a very high rate, and even still persists. So my dad retired when he was 45. I know a million people who retired around 45. So that was another problem. So how did Turkey beat inflation? How could we reduce inflation? In fact, it's by accident. So we didn't really do anything on purpose. We simply hit the wall. Why did inflation went down? We just had an accident. And two major events happened in late 90s and early 2000. We had two very bad earthquakes in 1999, and then we had very bad economic crisis in 2000, 2001. So we simply hit the wall, and we asked for help. A classical emergency room situation. Well, we asked for help from the usual suspects, IMF, the World Bank, and they said that, well, we can help you guys, but it's going to be a conditional help. And the only way we can help you guys is that, well, if you just guarantee fiscal discipline or austerity, privatize, and, just reduce agricultural subsidies. And then they sent another guy from the World Bank, Kemal Darwish, to implement the policies. So because we had no other choice, we accepted these changes. And inflation went down. Well, the next thing is, in the next 10 years, we had a very high income growth. And why income growth happens? Well, if you invest in physical capital or human capital, the economy is going to grow up. Or if there is technological progress, the economy is going to grow fast. Of course, to have these three happening, you need a legal environment or institutional environment that favors it. So like property rights, constraints on the executive, low transaction costs. And of course, vested interest. So you need to curb vested interest. If you look at Turkey, you can easily see that with the exception of 2009, which is world crisis, economic growth performance is much higher than the rest. If you look at it every 10 years, so there is high performance. And why we had this high performance? Well, apparently IMF forced us to be fiscally responsible, and we had this. Another thing, we have now a single-party government in the last 10 years, I think, since 2002. Well, it made things much better. Right now, when they make a decision, they can act upon it. In the past, there were coalitions, and it was really tough. And apparently, I could hear Turkish people in the room, well, okay, things went better, but is there anything that our, prime minister did? Well, indeed, the government, the Erdogan government in the office did something very good in terms of investing on public infrastructure, because we did really lack it. So they spent a lot of money on highway stock, and they almost doubled everything in the last 10 years. They increased airport transportation. They invested money on those. Increased utilization of ports. So simply, they improved the capital stock in the country that's necessary for economic growth. As a result, we experienced fast economic growth. Another reason is privatization. We got rid of those money-losing public enterprises. And in exchange, we didn't employ so many people in these institutions. Right now, people are employed in more productive areas, and it's a simple it's a simple thing. Naturally, it has a positive impact, and I think our speaker, Osman, is going to talk about it today. Influx of high amounts of foreign direct investment, so money started coming in, and the reason is it's a stable environment. The environment favors, just proliferating business, so money is coming in. In my view, these are the reasons for reduced inflation and increased growth. So IMF helped us reducing inflation and sustaining, fiscal discipline. And then the government later on continued these fiscal discipline, austerity, and in fact, they invested a lot on the infrastructure, so things got better. Well, when I look at future, it seems like you talked about this for a while before, but I think we need to give a priority to a few things so that we can exploit the opportunities in the future. The first one is democratization. Well, even though there have been quite a few good changes in my own view, I think the current status is not really sustainable, because if in a day the government changes, I would think there would be a lot of vengeance and bad things. So we need to improve on democratization. Another thing, let the market economy function. I think in a U.S. university, everyone knows this. Make education a priority. Well, we really lag behind education in terms of per capita basis, so we need to invest in education. Well, keep investing in infrastructure. Another thing, rebuild Istanbul, because if we expect a big earthquake, and if that happens, Istanbul is gone. So that's a very important, vital issue. Other things, well, for so many years with the drive, these cars, for the reason that we tried to protect our auto industry, and basically vested interest made its case very successfully, as Detroit is trying to make their case right now in the US. So if we want to be successful in the future or sustain high growth, we should curb the vested interest. And who can be vested interest? Well, it can be anyone: military, big business, historically, farmers, workers, seculars, and religious groups. So I think if we want to be successful in the future, we should do things right. Thank you for listening to me.
those of us who used to read news and read newspaper in the 60s, International Monetary Fund, it was a recipe for disaster in every developing country. Now, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The International Monetary Fund was a recipe for disaster. Every time they come to your country with their recipes, it means political and economical disaster, and by the way, high inflation. Are we to learn here that the International Monetary Fund have changed in the new millennium, or that Turkey happened to be an exception?
Well, I think Turkey is an exception for a very good reason. If you read Milton Friedman's book, written in 80s, 90s, you can foresee what's going to happen in Turkey. It's more like, you have fever, some flu, you go to the hospital, emergency room is taking care of you. So our case was very standard. So anyone knew it. Information, knowledge was not an issue. It was political will applying those policies. But for instance, Asian crisis, right? They went there and they said, well, you need to have strict fiscal policy. I doubt it if it was the right thing to do. So I think Turkish people don't like this, but it's a reality. Turkey was a very average case, very mediocre case in terms of crisis in late 90s. So that's why it worked, I think. Yes.
I see that you didn't mention in the important things that should happen in Turkey in the future, the role of women and their education and their further involvement in the business as being one of those priorities. And I wonder why.
Just because I am a male? Well, I very strongly agree. And in fact, I was planning on putting slides on the level of education, female labor force participation, human rights, so many other things. But I only had 15 minutes, so by democratization, I tried to cover everything around it. So I agree with you, and I think it's very important. Yes?
Do you believe that Turkey's previous interest in joining the European Union led to any kind of specific economic reforms within the country?
I think so, yes. Well, right now, Europe is not a popular favorite place. But we tried to enter Europe very aggressively. And indeed, I think in terms of making laws that favors higher democracy, human rights, property rights, was enabled by this process because there was a huge opposition to democratic changes. And I think this was a very clear, obvious thing. Another thing is this: in mid-90s, we changed our import-export rules pertaining to the auto industry, and it was really the European influence because it was customs rules change, and I think it also helped. I guess. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. The next speaker I have the privilege of introducing is Dr. Osman Kilic. Dr. Kilic is a professor of finance here at Quinnipiac. Many of you know Professor Kilic. And he received his PhD and master's from the University of New Orleans, his MBA from the University of South Alabama, his bachelor's degree from Istanbul Technical University. He is widely published and is a visiting faculty member at Merrill Lynch and Chase Asset Management. Prior to receiving his PhD, Professor Kilic worked as a marine engineer at Zodiac and Dunya Companies. Professor Kilic.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming and listening to me. Even the subject, foreign direct investment, is kind of economics related. I know I'm an investment professor, mainly the hedge funds and so on. I'll do my best. But let me ask you this one. Think about it. Hopefully one day, maybe 20, 30 years from now, one of you or all of you is going to run one of the major companies. All right? Think about you running GE or division of GE, And then you're going to make a decision. Is that like a capital budgeting project? So you have tons of capital and you want to invest in another country. Put down a factory, healthcare related, or think about, I don't know, building a turbine or whatever it is, okay, in another country. The things that you're going to look at it, instead of just doing a question and answer, some of the things that you're going to look at, number one, is there an enough market for your product that you're going to build, manufacture and overseas? The size of the market. All right, let's take a look at the population of Turkey. It's about 75 million. China, 1.2, 1.3, very Shahan. I can see her. What is it, 1.2, 1.3 billion? India? And India has already surpassed China, right, as a population? I don't care about Turkey then. I'm going to go out and build a factory in China or India if I'm looking at a potential market that you're looking at it. Well, how about the countries, surrounding countries as a marketplace around Turkey? I'm just going to jump from one place to another one, and then let's see. I'm going to look at this one. I just try to scan it, and then, just through via my email, my file space, try to post it. So if you cannot read the number, let me tell you. Look at this. Epicenter is in Turkey. That's where the Turkey is located, is in the middle. And you're looking at a 3 to 4 hours flight time. So from Istanbul, you jump into the flight and you go into the, the corner of European Union. Now you're talking about close to 4 hours. Well, I'm going to Moscow, about 3 hours or so. You flew from Moscow, right, to Istanbul? What was it, 3 hours? About that one. And then I'm just jumping in to go to some place in North Africa. Similar type of thing. 3 to 4 hours. But look at this one, potential market. Europe, about, I can hardly read it, it's just close to 600 million people. 27 countries. Middle East and North Africa, about 600 plus million. Central Asia and Caucasus, around that region, all Turkish republics and so on. You're looking at about 80 million. Russia, about 142. So if you keep up these numbers, it's close to the China's numbers, close to the India's number. And look at there's a big difference. What is the China's GDP? Based on the, the PPP is about 4 or 5 trillion, somewhere around that number, right? Let's say 5 trillion. Here, potential market, so-called, it comes around $23 trillion. Now it's a different ballgame. There's a potential market. I can use Turkey as a hub, and I can, basically sell my goods. Where I will sell my goods without any custom duty to European Union? Yeah. Even though Turkey is a so-called candidate country, still negotiating with Europeans, but they have been in Europe. As far as we know, going back to the history, even the Ottomans, they never look at the East unless someone attacked them. They always look at the West. Even the culture is mixed. Eastern and Western mixed culture that you're looking at. So, since 1996, if I'm not mistaken, we have the custom union with European, the Eurozone. So it's basically, you can easily sell custom-free, duty-free to European countries. That's an $18 trillion market. I'll take it. And they have all those individual agreements with the North African and Russia, all those, at the individual level. So there is a tremendous amount of benefits. Now, that's the one thing, potential market, I'm looking at it. What else I needed? Remember, you have to make a decision. That's the billions of dollar investment decision. If you messed up, then you have a problem. You're going to end up losing your job. Infrastructure, right? Professor Jesser, he already talked about it. He mentioned it, right? I have data, I was looking at it. Let me see. Look at out of 10, at the scale of 10, this is based on 2010. 7.32, that's the infrastructure efficiency rate, which is quite a bit of high for a country still working on its development. That's the big number. And it ain't over yet. It still needs so much investment, and then you're looking at some of the projects that you mentioned, they are building up. It's going to keep going on that one. And as long as they have a political stability, that's another thing you need to worry about. If you look at the history of Turkey, in the previous panelists, they discussed about the history of Turkey and so on. Main issues here, if you go back and look at all those history, the so-called violent times, whenever you have the coalitions in the political arena. I don't like what you're doing it. No, I don't, he doesn't like what I am doing it, or she doesn't like what I am doing, or I don't like what she is doing. Is a problem. But whenever Turkey has a single party ruling there's a parliamentary election. So there's a prime minister, in a sense, and assigns all those, the ministers and so on. As long as the one country is ruling the whole country at the political level, guess what? Things seems to be working better. It happened in the 80s. It happened in the 50s. Till it break down. And it's been happening last 10 years. I don't know what's going to happen next. So I have no idea. I'm not a political analyst. But this is one of the major things that you're looking at it in Turkey. All right? So what is left? Well, I need a highly educated workers. That's where the universities comes to the picture. We used to have tons of state-run institutions. Only a few of them is really good. Major of them suck, terrible. All right? But last 5+ years, you start to see private institutions. Those are every single one of them are non-profits start opening up. And right now about I think somewhere around 180 institutions that you're looking at it. Compared to us, we have about 3,500 4-year degree. I mean, it has still tons of way to go. They need to have somewhere around 400, 500 level. You're looking at it. I hope that one day they will. And we're trying to establish a relationship anyway. And you cannot assume that. I mean, it's going to take time. It takes time. But you see the right movement is going on. And then regarding the woman, and I do go all those universities, bunch of them. I make presentation to them. I see those issues, the role of the woman in the society and so on. It is improving. I go to the eastern part of Turkey too, make a presentation. I was born and raised in Adana, which is the farther end of the corner of the Mediterranean that you're looking at it. In that region, it's so funny. It may sound funny. Women, every single parents, fathers especially, they, in a sense, that force their ladies, the little kids, especially the female one, you need to go and educate yourself. Do not depend on the male. I still go there. I make a presentation, and then we're looking at establishing a relationship between the universities. 2 years they go there, last 2 years they come here. Majority of the question, 90% of them is coming from the female students, not the male students. They want to come here, they want to study, up their education to bring it to the next level and so on. Go back, work in the family business or whatever it is and so on. They are not there yet. I mean, you kept asking that question. I had to explain that based on my, at least my experience that I'm going through. But it has a way to go that you're looking at it. So we have all those things. I know you asked the question, well, why Turkey? Why in an emerging market country? Why not Germany? Why not UK? Why not US? You wait for your questions.
I have a question. I was going to say, over market saturation in those developed nations.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Over market saturation in those developed nations.
Developed nations, that's one of the things we're looking at. But what I am interested in, look at this data. Again, this is based on 2010. This is an estimate that you're looking at it, percentage of global GDP that you're looking at it. Emerging markets, like China, India, Brazil, the Russia, Turkey, South Africa, you name it. You name it, those countries still developing. They are developing so fast. They are becoming a lot more dominant, even at the GDP level. How about as a customer that I'm looking at it? This gap, look, in 2005, we consumed 35% more than the emerging economies. In 2010, at the same level. I don't have the data for today, but I bet you theirs is a lot higher than us. Especially last 6-7 years. Even Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke was shocked, in his presentation. The development of the emerging market nations compared to the developed nation is phenomenal. The gap is closing so fast. It's so fast. Is it going to keep that, the gap is actually closing that fast, and actually emerging market countries as a total is going to surpass all those developed. Good, yeah, I bet you. You know why? Look at this one. Wrong one. Let me see, hold on. This is the one. Look, this is the total debt. Government, businesses, banks, every single one, as a percent of GDP. UK, almost 500%. Japan, again, 400, almost 500. Spain, France, Italy, South Korea, us, Germany, Canada. I don't see China over there. I don't see India over there. I don't see Brazil over there. I don't see Russia over there. I don't see Turkey over there. Public debt to GDP, government debt to GDP in Turkey is about 40%. You know the threshold of the Maastricht criteria? 60%, 60. Even Germany's debt is higher. So they should kick the Germany out, actually. You know the French side, I know I have a German student. She's looking at me. But that's the reality. This is an impediment to the growth. And there is not an easy solution out there. This thing is going to take decades to solve. So what's going to happen to other countries? Keep growing. Keep growing. I mean, look at this one. There is no Turkey. This is the BRIC. Again, as Professor Engel indicated, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. This is the middle class coming to the picture. By 2020, look at the numbers, all those BRIC nations. It's about 1.4 billion people becoming, in a sense, a middle class. I'll give you an investment idea, guys. Okay? Think about it. Those people has to eat meat. All right? And you have to feed them, the animal, cattle. All right? And then, the oil is declining. And now, the supply of oil is declining, but the demand is also increasing. So, alternative energy, which is driven by the agriculture. So what it says, keep buying the agriculture product, nothing else. Look at this one. I mean, it's phenomenal growth that you're looking at it. Look, I know again Professor Engel mentioned the mist. And by the way, Jim O'Neill. Anybody know Jim O'Neill? He's a buddy of mine. I know. He is the global wealth asset management guy, head for the Goldman Sachs, and he is actually one of the candidates to run the Bank of England. It may sound crazy, but that job is a lot more important than the Federal Reserve in the global financial area. And he's one of those guys. He's the one who came up with the BRIC, and he's the one who also came up in 2011 with the MIST, the Mexico and Indonesia, South Korea, and Turkey. This is his work, not mine, all right? This is his. I think sometimes in October or November he was given a speech. You can watch, if you do the Google, you'll find out. People are still scared of all those places, isn't it? I mean, think about yourself. Anyone has been to China? Raise your hands. I know you. This I have a couple of kids. Anyone has been to Turkey? Same number of people. Anyone has been to Indonesia? Couple of people, very nice. And Mexico, I assume that less people to Mexico. I mean, just hey, but look at it. Just a 10% or 15% of us. Okay? People need to economically and socially start thinking about these countries in a very different way than they have in the past. As a student, think about yourself as a businessman. You may end up working in Turkey 5 years from now, 10 years from now. 3 minutes? No, I need to speed up. All right, this country's GDP has increased from 4 trillion to 16 trillion in the last 10 years. Just imagine. They created one US economy in 10 years. How about next 10? They can do the same thing. They have a way to go. Now you can understand why you want to go. Look at, something about Turkey's 16th largest, and that's the fastest growing economy in Europe, second fastest after China in the world, about 8.6% real GDP growth. Largest commercial vehicle producers in Europe, 16th largest automobile, blah, blah, 8th largest steel producer, just blah, blah, just going through. And look, it's another thing, one of the lowest 6 days per employee rates. That's also amazing, just you're looking at it. And let me tell you, this is the estimate for the economic growth from the OECD. Turkey is, just you're looking at it around somewhere around 6.7% next 7, 8 years, that growth that you're looking at it. But look at this number, foreign direct investment. Before 2002, since the establishment of the Republic in 1923, the total number of foreign direct investment to Turkey, only 15 billion. You gotta be kidding me. Oh gosh, look at this. But since 2003, 2010, just for 7, 8 years, it jumped to 94 billion. Of course, inflation level being stabilized at a low level, single digit. Of course, the effect of the political stability. Of course, the effect of the European Union. You know what happened? Since he became the prime minister in 2002, the first thing he started doing is jump into the plane, going from one European center to another one. And they pushed so hard to change the laws to become a compatible with the European Union. They slowed down the last couple of years, if you ask personally. I hope that there will be another push, so the country become a lot more democratic, and then you'll see that actually economic growth is going to jump. Think about another thing. This is a country, they have almost zip natural resources. They have a huge current account deficit, 50% of it because of the oil and natural gas import. They don't have it. They have limited resources. If that's the case, how in the world this country is growing on average 6, 7, 8%? It's unbelievable. It's phenomenal that you're looking at it, this number. And what I like about this one, I'm sorry, it's in Turkish a little bit. I was able to find it someplace. But I'm gonna tell you, look at the 2011 number, all right? This is about the investment by the private sector and the government in Turkey, all right? So the private sector, look at actually is the government side of it. If you look at the second one from the top, in 2011 actually it dropped by 6%. But if you look at the private sector, which is the third one from the top, it jumped by 35%. I love it. I don't want the government touch. Private sector is actually involving. I agree with Professor Jesser. The phenomenal financial economic crisis, 1994-95, 2000 and 2011, they hit the bottom. And then you know what public thinks? Think about it as a business person. You're going to the bed, you are a wealthy individual. In the morning, they are doing the devaluation in the middle of the night. You are poor, you're broke. All those raw material that you bought is in dollars or euros. I'm broke. They said, damn it, the government, that's it. I'm taking my business to overseas, or I'm just exporting it. Before 1980, export was 2 billion. Right now, last year is about 130 billion. Target is 150. That number is just phenomenal growth that you're looking at it from that perspective. Let me finish up real quick before Professor Engel. First 2 months of the year, FDI started increasing, which I like it. On average, you get about close to $2 billion, which is nothing. In 2010 and 11, you start the same number around 3 billion. But this year already, in the first 2 months of the year, they got about 1.68. Another thing I like is mergers and acquisitions. So the company from US, from Europe, from Asia, heading to Turkey and buying another company, acquiring another firm, or they are merging it. Or private equity is actually growing. So when you look at this number that you're looking at it, in 2011 they had about $15 billion mergers and acquisition deal, the total in whole country. 70% of this deal, in a sense, from the outside Turkey. So from companies from Germany, UK, US, or Middle East, they just came and bought another companies in Turkey, which is a great number, which is a great thing to actually for a country's development that you're looking at it. So these are the countries that you're looking at it based on the deals that you have it. Foreign investors, about 138 of them, 22 of them from our country, from here, okay? And that's the largest group that you're looking at it, actually. If you just eliminate the others from that group you're looking at. This is the private equities. is out of that 15 billion is only 1.2, but there is some interest for the private equity. I know what kind of deal you're looking at it. You know, the energy, healthcare, education, manufacturing, you know, the chemicals. They are just getting it from Eldos areas. I know before Professor Engel tells me something. That's it.
Thank you. Have a couple questions?
What would you say the effects of the ongoing issue with Cyprus and Greece would have on Turkey in the future?
No. But Greece is not. I will look at the Greece. Come on, guys. I mean, just this the political issues. If you look at the Greece, from economic sense, they are bankrupt. They have quite a bit of issues. I don't think they can resolve their issues in a short time period. If you go to Istanbul and walk around, one of the largest groups that comes to Turkey are the Greeks. There are a bunch of Greeks working in Turkey. That's one of the things that I started saying it, because for the development, you need money, you need high technology, you need highly educated employees. If you do not have all three, or any one of them, you need to import it.
Another question?
They don't have many natural resources. Are they going to be able to sustain this level of growth?
About 8 to 9% is I mean, you can achieve maybe a couple of years and so on. But average rate we're talking about 6%. That's in a sense the natural growth rate. They can achieve it. The only dilemma is the political instability. Because I'm gonna give you an example. A buddy of mine that we graduated from same school, from University of New Orleans, he finished a couple years earlier than I did. So he decided to go back to Turkey for a private university in Ankara, which is the capital city. And then 6 months later, he came back for his graduation ceremony. It was in December. So we were talking, discussing, and he was just so excited, all this type of thing. I told him, how are the things in Turkey? This is happening in the early 90s, during the tough times in Turkey. Political instability, economy is doing poorly, and so on. I said, I have decided it has nothing to do with economics, all those problems in Turkey from economic standpoint. It's purely social and political issue. And I do agree with you. This from the political, if next government becomes a coalition, I don't think it's going to go back to the old times, but we'll struggle. We'll struggle.
One more.
Yes, sir.
In your opinion, what would be the most appealing growth aspect is for FDI in Turkey?
Oh. Well, I do give presentation to the business people in Turkey. I'm trying to convince them to basically, to match with the high technology firms. Just bring the manufacturing to be able to serve the surrounding countries that I showed you. And I'm hoping that that's the part that is going to happen. But the most likely case is, it depends on the money. You see it in the healthcare, and I think it's going to keep growing in the healthcare area, and education, another area, and you see it. It's not on the the university level, because universities are non-profit, but in the below that level, elementary school, middle school, and then the high school level, the system runs with the the private institution, and very profitable business. I know that one of the private equity firms based in here, I think I don't remember the name, is one of them, the top notch, and they just acquired an education firm in Turkey. That's in another area that you have it, manufacturing. Automotive manufacturing is up, and then government has a new plan. They just announced some type of tax breaks and so on to be able to minimize the effect of the imports on the current account deficit. So it's called the middle. So you have the raw material, you process it, and then you have an end product. So that middle side of it, they import tremendous amount of goods. So they want to build it in Turkey, so they have a bunch of tax benefit and so on. So I'm guessing that in that area, in the manufacturing sector, so that we will see next couple of years increased activities for the FDI.
Our last speaker is going to be addressing what was, I think, the magic triangle, we can call it, as was mentioned before, the nexus of the Balkans, the Middle East, and the Caucasus. And two of those areas are going to be addressed by our next speaker, Professor Mohammed Alahi. Professor Elahi is a colleague of mine here in international business, professor of international business. He received his PhD from the University of Texas Pan American and an MBA from the University of New Brunswick, Canada. He's taught at the University of Monterrey, Mexico, University of Texas Pan American, University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, ESC Rennes, France, the Sadat Economy for Management Science in Egypt. He's also published in a number of journals, mostly in the area of business negotiations. And prior to joining the Academy, Dr. Elahi worked for the Deloitte & Touche and the World Bank in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Professor Engel. My friend Osman just told a great story about Turkey. He shared a great story about Turkey. Now tell me, what is the moral of that story? Next time when we offer a course in Turkey, study abroad course, make sure you sign up. Well, today we have 2 panels, and out of the 6 panelists, 5 are Turks. I'm the only one who is not a Turk. Actually, right now, the only thing that is Turkish in me is my tie, and nothing else is Turkish. But even though I'm not a Turk, I have been following Turkey for a number of years. From my childhood, I have been fascinated by Turkish culture and Turkish history. And I truly believe that Turkey will become one of the major powers. It is right now a regional power, but it will become one of the major global powers in the multipolar world. Before I share my thoughts on Turkish business influence in Central Asia and the Middle East, I want to share with you a few facts about Turkish history. First of all, you may know that until 1922, Ottoman Empire was one of the largest and most powerful empires in the world. It was one of the longest empires which ruled parts of Europe, Asia, and North Africa for about 600 years. And at that time, Turkey had a close relationship with the Middle East and Central Asia. I'm not sure if this is very visible, and unfortunately I cannot enlarge it, but as you can see, that all the way from Algeria to Saudi Arabia, this entire region was part of Turkey, and so was Central Europe, the Balkan states. They were all part of the great Ottoman Empire. Now, where did the Turkish people come from? There are different opinion, but most experts believe that Turkish people originated somewhere in Altai mountain in Russia, and from the beginning they have been looking west. So from Russia they moved to Central Asia, from Central Asia they moved to the Middle East. Around 9th or 10th century they all embraced Islam, and from that period onwards for about 1,000 years Turkish people played the most important role in the Middle Eastern political and military developments for about 1,000 years. But that relationship came to a screeching halt in 1923. After the First World War, the Turkish Empire disintegrated, and the modern Turkey, it emerged out of the ashes of the Ottoman Empire. And Kemal Atatürk, who is the founder of the modern Turkey, he was very inward-looking as opposed to the Ottomans, who were very outward-looking. And when Kemal Atatürk took over, basically Turkey was focused only within its borders. Its relationship with the Middle East suffered tremendously. Actually, for about 20 or 30 years, there was hardly any relationship. And for about 80 years, or 70 years, there was no relationship with Central Asia whatsoever. Okay. Now let me begin with Central Asian countries and what their relationship with Turkey is. Now, what exactly is Central Asia? It's a huge area starting from Caspian Sea on the west, all the way to China on the east, and Afghanistan to the south, to Russia in the east. It's a huge landmass with about more than 60 million people. And in that region, there are at least 4 countries which are Turkish-speaking. All these stans, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. There is another country, Tajikistan, whose primary language is actually Persian, but still there is a sizable Turkic population in Tajikistan as well. Turkey has ethnic cultural, religious, and linguistic ties with all these countries. But fact of the matter is, Central Asian countries were never part of the Ottoman Empire. They were ruled by another group of Turks. If I go back to the previous map, as you can see, the Turkish border, it does not include the Central Asian countries. And even today, none of these countries have direct borders with Turkey. But that ethnic ties, linguistic ties, it is very strong. And this tie is strong not just with these 4 countries, but also some other countries in the region, such as Azerbaijan, which actually, even though we are talking about Central Asia, Azerbaijan considers itself as a European country. That's why it doesn't appear under this list. And Turkey also has close relationship with Georgia. Okay. Now, in 1991, when Soviet Union disintegrated, it just came as a shock to many people. And suddenly, all these tons, all these Turkic-speaking countries, they became independent. At that time, Turkey was a little bit unprepared to deal with this new discovery of relationship with their brothers. It was, in a sense, they rediscovered their brothers, but they did not know how to embrace them, how to lead them. And initially, there was an euphoria. There was a belief that maybe Turkey could become the natural leader, and those countries would actually would engage in business through Turkey. But that did not really happen. Nevertheless, Turkey started building some institutions to forge close ties with those countries. And beginning from 1992, Turkey has been hosting a summit of all the Turkic-speaking countries. In 1991, former Turkish Prime Minister Turgut Özal, he was the first Turkish leader to make a trip to one of the Central Asian countries when it was still part of the Soviet Union. Turkey also established an international organization of Turkic culture, which is called Turksoy. There has also been a treaty signed in 2009, Nakhichevan Treaty, which is somewhat like, you can say, Maastricht Treaty in Europe. And it basically established a cooperation council of Turkish-speaking states. Turkey is also giving loans to the Turkic countries through its own Exim Bank, just like in the USA we have Export-Import Bank. Turkey also has also a similar bank. And Turkey also established a bank, or a development agency, I should rather say, Turkish Cooperation and Development Agency, TICA, which is patterned after the World Bank and the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. Turkey also started a great student project, which brings students from Central Asian countries to Turkey, and Turkey to Central Asian countries. It is like the Erasmus scholarship that EU provides. Turkey is also opening schools under its Ministry of National Education in different countries. And on top of that, there are many private Turkish schools that are starting not just in Central Asia, but all over the world. I think you will find a Turkish school in every country in the world except 3 countries. And those countries are Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Uzbekistan. Turkey recently had some problems with Uzbekistan. There is also a Turkish university that started in Turkestan in Kazakhstan, and another university in Kyrgyzstan. So these are all recent initiatives. Now, as far as economic ties are concerned, I would say that with Central Asia, most of the initiatives were taken at the government level. And Turkey has been focused mostly on the energy and infrastructure. Turkey's trade volume with the Central Asian countries was about 6.5 billion by the end of 2010. And if you go back 20 years, it was 0. So from 0 to $6.5 billion. The Turkish investment, it is over $4.7 billion. But that is not the end of the story. The total worth of all the projects in which Turkish companies are engaged in this region, that is worth over $30 billion. And about 3 years ago, a gas pipeline was built from the Azerbaijan. As you know, Azerbaijan is a very oil-rich country. From Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, all the way up to Ceyhan in Turkey. And basically, this created a new, not just oil link, but a psychological link with that region. And I believe there is another gas pipeline under construction and another rail between Istanbul and Kar in Azerbaijan. That is also under active consideration, and the construction work may have already begun. Now that is about Central Asia. Now let me talk a little bit about Middle East and North Africa, which was, unlike Central Asia, it was part of the Ottoman Empire. But after the First World War, the relationship hardly existed. And for the first 70 years, frankly speaking, and again I'm talking from an outsider's perspective, Turkish and Arab people, they did not really like each other. It was not as bad as like Iran and Turkey, Iran and the Arab countries, but still there was some mutual distrust. And it was partly because the government that was in power in Turkey, they were very secular and they wanted to get rid of all their ties with the Islamic past. But it started changing after 2002 when the current government led by the AK party, AKP, came to power. And the surprising thing is that Turkey has been very successful in building ties with both the Arab countries and Iran. In my 46 years of life, I'm yet to meet a single Iranian who does not hate Arabs and a single Arab who does not hate Iranians. So it is actually by no means a great achievement that Turkey has been able to build close ties with both the Arab countries as well as Iran. Right now, actually, not right, I should say just last year, over 2,000 Iranian companies, they were incorporated in the city of Istanbul, just in 2011. Now, some people might argue that Iranian companies are doing that to avoid the sanction. Maybe that is the reason. But there has been tremendous inflow of capital from Iran, from Middle Eastern countries such as Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. The telecom company in Turkey, that is 100% owned by a Saudi company. The largest mobile operator of Turkey, Turkcell, it is very active in Central Asia, and it also has investment from Russia, from Scandinavia, but there are also some Arab investors. Turkish business is very active in building gas pipeline, construction, whether it's railway terminal or airport terminal. You can find electronics goods, consumer goods, all types of goods, tablewares, carpet, you name it, from Algeria to Tehran, everywhere, which was not the case even 10 years ago. And the Middle Eastern countries, they have traditionally been investing in the US or Middle East. Now they also want to diversify, and they're also investing in Turkey. Turkey also signed a free trade agreement with Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, which are known as Maghreb countries in North Africa. And Turkey is also in the process of signing a free trade agreement with the Gulf Cooperation Council, which consists of Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. Turkey is also playing an important role in the political arena. It tried to broker a deal between Syria and Israel, but it failed when Israel actually invaded Gaza about 2 years ago. And since then, the relationship between Israel and Turkey deteriorated. But we have to remember, in that region, Turkey was the first country which had relationship with Israel. And Turkey actually used that relationship as a leverage. But right now, again, it's not that good. Turkey is also an important participant of NATO in Afghanistan. They're in charge of training the Afghan troops. And Turkey is also playing an important role in the Arab Spring. The current Prime Minister, Erdogan, he was most vocal in demanding ouster of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. But initially, Turkey was a little tentative in its response to the Arab Spring. It was a little reluctant, and part of the reason could be that Turkey had heavy investment in Libya, more than $5 billion. It just started building relationship with Syria. In the past, Turkey did not have even diplomatic relationship with many of its neighbors. But the current foreign minister, who was in the academia, he wrote a very influential book, and he wanted Turkey to have a strategic depth. And his philosophy was zero problem with the neighbors. And that is when Turkey started warming up with its neighbors. So Turkey initially did not want to have any rupture in that relationship. But when the situation really got worse, Turkey became a very big proponent of pro-democracy movement in Syria, Libya, as well as in other Arab countries. But when Turkey re-established relationship with the Middle East, this realignment, it cost Turkey its previous relationship with Israel. Okay, now what are some of the challenges? It seems right now everything is going great with both Central Asian countries, which is more at the government level, as well as with the Middle Eastern countries, which is more at the private sector level. But still there is some apathy in the Middle East from the First World War. Now, sometimes we read in the newspaper or in the books that Middle Eastern people don't like Turkey because they were occupiers. But I think that interpretation is not correct. Most Middle Eastern people that I have spoken with, and I have just returned from Jordan 1 day ago. And when I was in Jordan, I again was talking with different common people and asking them about Turkey. What is their opinion about Turkey, its history? And what most people tell me, that by and large, people have fond memories of Ottoman empires. Just in the last 50 years, when Ottomans became very nationalistic under the Young Turks, and Turkey tried to impose its own language, in the last 50 years, a lot of problems arose between the Arab countries and the Turks. But previously, before that last 50 years, it was pretty good relationship. And they are interested in forging closer ties with Turkey. Okay, and now there is another problem. Central Asian countries, initially in the 1990s, Turkey thought that it would be their natural leader. But those Central Asian countries, they were courted both by USA as well as Russia, also by China, to some extent by Iran. So they have been getting too much attention, and they did not want to go through Turkey anymore. They wanted to deal directly with the West as well as with Russia. And I think initially, Turkish expectation was a little unrealistic. But the current policy that Turkey has, one expert called it romanticism mixed with pragmatism. So current policy is actually working better than what it was in the 1990s. But there is also fear among people in Central Asia as well as in the Middle East. The Turkey is now quoting them because it could not join EU. If Turkey can join the European Union, then it will again abandon the Middle East and Central Asia. I don't believe that will happen, but that is a fear. And there is another fear that the gains that Turkey made in the last 10 years, it could be easily reversed if there is a change in the government in Turkey. If another secularist or Kemalist party comes to power, they will again become somewhat inward-oriented, and they may try to build better relationship with other countries at the expense of its relationship with the Middle East. Maybe the relationship with Central Asian countries would not suffer that much if the secularists or Kemalists come to power. But the relationship with the Middle East, it might suffer. So anyway, these are my thoughts. Thank you all for listening to me.
What do you think the solution is going to be as far as the European Union is concerned and their relationship? Do you see a solution possibly occurring as making a commitment one way or the other? If Turkey decides, will Turkey decide, no, I don't want the EU?
No, I think Turkey will still be interested, but I think in the immediate future, European Union is not interested. Because if Turkey joins, its population is growing, and in the EU, the vote depends on the number of population. Germany will lose its number one spot to Turkey pretty soon. Germany has about 82 million, Turkey has about 76 million. So that is one problem. And I think from an economic point of view, it makes sense for European Union to take Turkey. EU needs Turkey more than Turkey needs EU, from an economic point of view. But from a socio-cultural point of view, they already have enough Muslims. Some people are calling Europe already Eurabia. They do not want another 75 or 76 million Muslims in the European Union.